In this video, we are going to take a hypothetical technical requirement and try to write the code using callbacks. Then we'll try to convert the same into promises, and then finally we'll try to solve the same using async await. As this video is going to be lengthy, what I'm thinking is I'm going to do 3-part series. Okay, part 1 is going to be on the callbacks, and then part 2 is like converting into promises, and then coming to part 3 it's going to be ultimately async and await. The hypothetical technical requirement that I talked about is this. Okay, you can see on the screen, like first what we're going to do is we're going to validate a user using AWS Cognito, and then after that, once we validate the user, and then what we're going to do is we're going to check the database. Okay, the database that I'm going to use in this demo is MySql. Okay, in that we're going to check whether the user is active or not. If he's active, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go fetch his leave balance. Okay, there is some table in MySql called leaves, wherein we store all the users leave balance, or you can say it as an employee or employee's data. Okay, so this is the hypothetical technical requirement that we're going to solve using callbacks, then promises, then async await. So let's say we have a web application like this, okay, and then we have a NodeJS server. Okay, this is where the piece of code that we're going to write here, first initially callbacks and then promises, then async await. So web server will hit this web application will hit this web server that is written in Node.js, and it'll go and talk to AWS Cognito. So this is the first step. Okay, we'll validate. And then once he is validated, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit MySql database and check whether the user is active or not. And then again, I'm going to hit MySql database and going to fetch the leave balances provided if the user is active. So looking at this setup, we can clearly understand we need AWS Cognito and MySql database. For that, what I did was I already created a dummy Cognito pool, user pool in AWS Cognito, and also I'm running MySql on my local machine using Docker. So if you are interested to know how I actually set it up, how to create Cognito pool, user pool in AWS Cognito, and how to run MySql in Docker, let me know in the comment section so that I'll prioritize accordingly and make the videos related to that. So let's quickly dive in and start coding. So what I did was I opened my VS Code and I created a folder and called it as callback evolution demo. Okay, and here I'm going to create a file called callback.js, or instead of that, what I am going to do is I'm going to create a folder and I'll call it as callbacks, and in that I'm going to call as index.js. Okay, I increased the font and I copy pasted the steps here that we are trying to achieve. Okay, so first we need to know how to validate a user using AWS Cognito. What I can do is I can quickly open my browser and start searching for AWS SDK for Cognito. I open my Brave browser. Directly we can go ahead and search AWS SDK Cognito, AWS SDK for JavaScript. Okay, it's already suggesting me because I previously opened that. Okay, so we directly go there, and here if you go through this entire documentation, you will see how we can actually interact with the Cognito pool ID, how we can create the pool, and how we can create the users and authenticate and all those things. Okay, here we are only concerned with authentication, admin initiate auth. So what I'm going to do is I simply copy this entire code and I'm going to keep it here. Okay, so here we don't need all these things. These are all not even mandatory. So directly I'm going to go ahead and delete them. So this is the piece of code. What I can do is simply I can make them as const parameters, and then instead of this I can put them in curly braces, and then else part also I'll just refactor a bit. Okay, nothing much logically we are doing here, and that's it. So but here what we are supposed to do is auth flow. What's the auth flow? So for me, you don't have to know all these things because this is entirely different AWS Cognito. All you have to do is here how this callback is working and how we can actually achieve the technical requirement that we are talking about, okay, or that we talked about. So here client ID, all these things I previously set up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to simply copy paste these values now. So, okay, as I said, I previously set up AWS Cognito in my personal AWS account. So I simply copy pasted the values here. This is the username NerdyNani, and this is the temporary password that I've created. Using this, we'll try to authenticate the very first step that we are trying to achieve, AWS Cognito authentication. So there are certain things that we missed. Basically, we are supposed to import the library, which we didn't do. But what we can do is we can directly go ahead and start executing. So obviously it will tell what exactly is the issue. So obviously it is telling, first of all, the Cognito service provider is not defined. So we need to actually include AWS SDK library. Now what I did was I included AWS SDK library and also updated the region and the necessary things that are needed to actually kickstart our authentication step. Okay, so now I'm gonna open the terminal and run it. Index, this is in another folder, right? So that's the problem. Node index.js, again it is telling I did not find the SDK, so all I have to do is AWS SDK. Okay, installation is done. What I can do is now I'm gonna run it. Perfecto. So basically if you look at, so we've got a refresh token and also access token, and this, with this access token, what we're going to do is we are going to actually access other APIs. Okay, so we are least bothered about this because our target is, okay, we authenticated the user got authenticated. For suppose if I actually give another username, okay, he's not there basically in Cognito. If I try to run it, you can see I've got this incorrect username or password. Basically this user is not there. So this user is there. So the step one is success. And coming to step two, what we are supposed to do is check whether the user is active or not in MySQL database. Okay, so if you look at here, the Docker, this is an extension that comes with VS Code. If you install it, it's very easy to manage. I actually installed MySQL 8.0 and you can see the container is actually running. So MySQL is up and running. So in order to access it, again, let's say that we don't know anything. So we'll go check out the MySQL library in NPM registry. Okay, this I'm going to open a new tab and I'm going to type in NPM MySQL. So it got opened and all I have to do is, and here is an example how to use MySQL. So directly I'm going to copy this piece of code and paste it here. Okay, that MySQL piece of code. What I'm going to do is, this is all AWS thing, right? So after this I'm gonna paste this. I need to require, so let's do some refactoring kind of thing. I'm gonna put it here, MySQL. I'm gonna scons and connection, it's localhost only, and the user is root. That is what I set up. I already set up. Okay, so password is password and database is MySQL. So these are the sample two tables that I've created, users and leaves, and also this is leaves table. Okay, and I inserted the data into the users table. Like I inserted two users, NerdyNani, another user Kalyan. Okay, these are the user IDs 1 and 2, and also I inserted leaves as user ID 1, that is NerdyNani, has 50 leaves or leave balance, and also user ID 2, that is Kalyan, has 52 leave balance. Okay, this is what I already did, and we are going to directly use the same here in our code. So what we are supposed to do is select star from users where is there any active is there, true, right? The column is active. Okay, where is active is equal to true. In order to avoid the confusion, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another function and I'll call it as is active, is user active, and then here I'm going to put this entire logic. Okay, this entire thing I'll keep it here. So this is basically Cognito and this is MySQL. And then here I should also give where my username is what? Username. Okay, where username is equal to we can give it username, and here I'll pass that as username, and I'm going to give it as this thing. Okay, we are done writing this, and we can test it later on. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is, if this user is active, okay, here it means the user is authenticated, and we'll come into this else part. I don't have to print this. All I have to do is I have to check whether this user is active or not. Okay, and I need to pass the username as well. Okay, username I need to pass. So for time being, what I'm going to is we'll modify accordingly. For time being, I'll give NerdyNani, and I'm going to give a function callback. Okay, function and a result. That's it. So here I'm going to give the second parameter as callback, and if it is error, throw error. Else, what I'm supposed to do is I'm supposed to give callback. That means no error, nothing, false. So error is false or error is nothing, and in the result I'm supposed to return a result. So what I can do is I'll remove this, and in this case I'll give callback as true. Error is true, right? And the message is I don't know, so simply I'll give I'm going to give this error so that I can handle this accordingly in this else part. Okay, and if else, and then I can give this piece of code. So basically we are writing using callbacks. We used AWS SDK v1 version. Here also we have callbacks. So once this is successful, in this else part we are actually calling this MySql. Okay, and if this is successful, if the user is successful, what I can do is inside this, if error, then I have to deal accordingly. Else means it is correct. I need to fetch what? I need to fetch the leave balance. For that, again I need to write another function, and in that function, so in this connection also, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the connection here itself the moment I got it. Okay, and I'm going to write another function and call it as fetch user balance, and then this is same as the previous one, and here I need to change the SQL query. So what I can do is select star from leaves. What's my table name? Table name is leaves. Okay, leaves, and the other one is leave balance. Directly I can give select leave balance from leaves, where it's user ID, right? We'll check it's user ID. So where user ID equal to user ID, and user ID, again it doesn't know what it is. So what I'm going to do is user ID, I'll pass it as first parameter, and then again I'm going to pass a callback, and here again it works fantastically fine. So I need to handle it here. If it is successful, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fetch user balance, and user ID. For time being I'll give 1. We are going to change it shortly, and error, result, and then again I have to handle it. If I get error, I need to handle it accordingly. Else, then finally I need to return what? The response. Okay, I need to return the response to the main function from where exactly I'm calling this. So what I'm going to do is, for time being, I can give like callback false, there is no error, and whatever result I get, I'll give it here. Okay, before running the program, what we're going to do is we'll make this dynamic. For it to be dynamic, the username, it's there in params. Okay, params, params dot auth params, and here in that we have username, right? Okay, now we need to actually know the result here. So are we printing the result? Yes, the result, the user data, we can get the user data from MySql. Okay, we'll try to run it and check it out. If there are any errors, we'll try to solve them. Okay, I'm gonna go to callbacks and then node index.js. Let's see. Aha, the same thing, cannot find the module MySql. Let's quickly gonna go ahead and install it. Okay, my npm MySql installation is done. I'm going to quickly go ahead and run the program, and it's taking a lot of time. So for that, what we can do is we'll try to enable this so that we'll get to know where exactly the control is going on. So we'll try to also add some stuff here, like console.log. If there is any error, we'll get to know error and error. And also if there is any error, we need to actually console log here so that we'll get to know, because there we are catching, but it's going to be only true. Okay, error in user active function. Okay, and then I'm going to give it as error. Let's see what happens. Close it, run it, and yes, we got some logs. So that's why it was waiting for a longer unknown column NerdyNani in where class. Okay, we need to place it like this, and also is active equal to 1. Okay, it's looking good. Let's try to run it again. Again, there is one more error. What is it telling? Okay, the data has come, the user data from MySql. Cannot enqueue handshake after invoking quit. So this is different error, but we are able to get the data, and the data is coming in the form of object and user ID is there. Okay, as we are getting the data, what I can do is here, instead of this thing, what I can do is I can give a result dot user ID is what we are getting, right? But will it come? No. That's the problem. User ID. Okay, now user ID will be passed, and again, in order to know whether there is any errors are happening or not, we can actually place another console log here. And did we actually put, okay, we're gonna print errors here so that we'll be aware what exactly is happening. Error in fetch user balance. Okay, and then I'm gonna give fetch user balance, and we're gonna run it and check it out now. So before running, what we can do is we can remove these unnecessary logs, and then we can actually run our program. Okay, we got the data, but it is telling cannot invoke handshake after invoking quit. Oh my goodness. So what I can do is I can simply copy this entire thing and go to our browser and check it out whether we're gonna get any help. And here, okay, the same issue, and he is telling that if you're using node MySql, just remove the connect and end, just solve the problem. As apparently they pushed unnecessary code in the last iteration that is also bugged. You don't need to connect if you have already created the connection. Okay, we'll follow this guide directly. Or so what he's telling is you don't have to actually use these things. That is what he's telling. Okay, some buggy code they push, that is what they're telling, but our concern is only about understanding the callbacks, right? And here also I'll remove them, and then okay, and then we'll try to run and execute the same. And okay, this time it worked, but the problem is CB is not defined. Where exactly the CB is not defined? Okay, leave balance is coming. Okay, here if we wrap this in another function, and then we will not be getting this error. But basically our program worked fine. There are no issues. If you see, first we authenticated, and if it is successful we'll come here, otherwise here only it will fail. And then our next step is what? I'm going to close this and remove this, and next step is check whether the user is active or not. So we wrote a function, and here we are checking, and here also we have a callback thing we actually used, and here we passed callback as an argument, and then finally we are returning the user ID. Okay, once we get the user ID, we are directly passing this to fetch leave balance, and finally we are showing it here. So what I can do is, instead of this thing, if I paste it here and call it as final result, as result, then I think you will see we achieved actually this technical. One second, node index.js. Perfect. See, final result, we've got the data. So we achieved what we are trying to achieve, but we achieved using callbacks. And many times, particularly when you are attending Node.js interviews, or most often when it comes to JavaScript, you might be already heard about callback hell. See, if you see here, is user active? Again, in this callback, I wrote this entire logic, and again in this callback, I wrote this entire logic. So a callback within a callback, and again in a callback. And let's say the technical requirement is so complex that you need to actually make 5 to 6 calls to a database. Okay, I still remember working for a startup wherein we need to do 6 DB calls. Okay, one after the other, 6 calls. So 6 calls I need to actually wrap in a callback like this, and finally it will end up being a callback hell.